Sayın Kenan Yıldırım'a çok teşekkür ediyoruz. Değerli misafirlerimiz, bu akşamki konferansımızın gerçekleşmesine katkısı olan başta ana sponsorumuz Siemens Ev Aletleri olmak üzere, sponsorumuz Bilkom'a, hizmet sponsorumuz Suman Otel'e ve duyuru sponsorlarımız Yapı Dergisi, Yapı.com.tr, Mimarizm ve Mimarist'e en içten teşekkürlerimizi sunuyoruz. Bu akşamki konuğumuz Meksika'dan dünyaya açılan mimar Michel Rojkind, aynı zamanda eski bir rock davulcusu ve iflah olmaz bir kaşif. 2002 yılında kurduğu Rojkind Architectos bünyesinde çalışan Rojkind, endüstri ürünleri tasarımından yapı ölçeğine kadar birçok örnek vermiştir. 2005 yılında Architectural Record'un 10 tasarım öncüsünden biri olarak değerlendirdiği Rojkind, son günlerde Kuveyt, Çin, Singapur, Dubai ve İspanya'daki çok sayıda büyük ölçekli yarışmalara davet edilmiştir. FWD dergisindeki teknoloji bölümünün editörlüğünü yapan Rojkind, Ordos, Marcus ve Chernikov başta olmak üzere birçok önemli ödül almıştır. Bu akşam Michel Rojkind bizlere bulaşıcı risk başlıklı konuşmasında süregelen ekonomik kriz bağlamında tasarım yapmanın güçlüklerinden ve farklı bağlamlara uyum sağlamak için strateji bilincinin gerekliliğinden söz edecek. Şimdi konuşmasını yapmak üzere Michel Rojkind'i kürsüye davet ediyorum.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. I'll try to speak slow so you hear the translation well. But the theme of the lecture, which is something that I like to talk a lot about, and I became a little bit more aware of the theme, no, contagious risk. In a way, society has taught us to fear contact, no? Fear this contagious part. Society tends always to feed fear, so we tend not to do things, and we tend not to experiment, and we tend not to even go outside. But as I always say, no, coming from Mexico City, you have 14 million, we have 22 million, but in a way, there's a lot of chaos going on, and it would be really difficult not to be exposed or to be contagious in this case. And the H1N1, which was the swine flu that had an outburst in Mexico, and all the Mexicans were seen as, the Mexicans are coming. They're going to bring their infectious disease, the H1N1. But I really became aware when this was happening, because you would start seeing people in the streets. You would start seeing images like this one, no? Kids playing, and they would play with their dolls, and they put the mask on the dolls of their faces. And this was, it was a way of playing, no? But when you were seeing kids doing things like this, I started becoming really aware of, in Mexico, we're a society that touches, and you meet your friends, and you hug, and you kiss when you meet, no? So it's a lot of contact that happens, and during specifically this time of the swine flu, nobody touched, no? It was like you would say hello to somebody, and it was like really, really cold in a way, no? I was missing that part. And as I was explaining, no, coming from a place like Mexico City, it's very chaotic, nothing works as it should. You're challenged all the time, but not only as the architect, no? You're challenged all the time as a human being. You try to walk out on the street, and then you're almost hit by a bus, no? And when I have my 6-year-old daughter, and when she was born, even carrying her with a stroller in the streets, you would be figuring or trying to understand why there were no public spaces, no? What was happening to the city. So to me, it's the perfect playground, no? Because if I would live in Switzerland, I don't know what I would be thinking of, no? I would not be able to be challenged all the time as a person, as an architect, or as a human being. I always also try to talk about my past, because that's who I am, no? In this case, my father and my mother, my father a National Science Prize in Mexico City, now living in the States. My mother, she went to look for her guru in India, so I was taught in this half really academic part and half really spiritual part. And even this thing about of contagious, when you're growing up that you think, who do you have to be like, your father or your mother? And at least in Mexican society, they always try to hit you in the head and teach you that you have to choose one, no? You can't choose many, because then you're not understanding what society is leaning towards or wants you to be in this way. So I was stuck between professions, and that was me in the band. When I was playing, we were signed with Virgin Records. We did 4 albums. We were having videos on MTV, but I was studying architecture at the same time. And the really frustrating thing for me was that when I was in school, my teachers would tell me that to please drop out of school, that I should leave architecture because I was wasting their time. I was already a musician. I was already playing in a band. And so my teachers were really angry at me for having these 2 parallel careers, no? Obviously, instead of stopping architecture, I went at it with a bit more aggression. No? I was really angry that they were telling me you can't do this and you can't do that. I hate when society tends to tell you not what things not to do. I started my profession and I was doing all sorts of architecture. I was doing houses. These were all built projects. Well, the F2 house was featured in Architectural Record in 2001. Then we did some projects for the government in Mexico, the National Videotheque. This is an interior of a building where we even tried to experiment as developers, where we really learned that we were not developers. But at the point, we convinced some family and friends, and we got together some money. We bought a piece of property, and we tried to develop this residential building. This is the center space of the building, and this is a view from the rooftop looking down, and you have 4 glass bridges. But this is the space where everybody gets to see each other. And we did this a little bit also out of understanding that the developers, they don't care about the common space. Developers only want to sell. They're interested only in how many square meters they can sell, and if it's not sellable, it's not worth having. And we're losing a lot of really important aspects of architecture because we're losing all these public spaces where people get together and well, actually they could meet, and that's where you have communities, no? But this was really not a good experiment. We were really bad at doing development, so we barely paid our family back. And when we did that, we said, okay, let's leave the development to the developers and architecture to the architects. No? So I kept on working on projects. I normally don't care about the scale. To me, design is about sitting down and understanding the challenges and understanding what you need to do. So the scale is not important. We've done residential refurbishments, even if it's a small apartment or if it's a big master plan. This was a time where I was working with 2 friends, 2 really close friends. Isaac Broyd, who's a very important architect in the Mexican modern time, because Isaac, along with Enrique Norten and Alberto Calach, they were responsible of opening up a modernist time back in Mexico. And Miquel Adria was my other partner, who has Arquine magazine. And so I had the fortune of working with this, on one hand, a really good critic who knew all the facts and knew all the important stories of architecture, and another architect who had been working for a long time. But after a couple of projects where I understood that they were constantly working in the same way, I wanted to experiment a bit more. So I wanted to go out of this office and start my own office. And I didn't want to be like this human being wrapped in plastic, really cautious of life. I wanted to experiment more. And I started experimenting. And the reason that I actually split from my partnership to be alone was not so I would not be able to experiment or to share things, but I wanted to share projects with whom I really wanted. No, in the case of this project, is a little bit going fast forward. Is it possible to dim the lights a little bit? Yeah, just a little, so they can see better the images. But anyway, here in the image is Bjarke Ingels, who's a really good friend of mine from BIG, and he came to Mexico City, and yeah, I think that's better. He came to Mexico City, and I was invited to do a competition for the Museo Tamayo, a very important museum in Mexico. And it was a 2-week competition. Some of these things that always happen in Mexico, I don't know why. Only 2 weeks to do a competition. But so he thought it was interesting. We entered the competition together. And it was the only, or at least until now, the only competition where where we could be working 24 hours continuous because we were Skyping all the time, no? So instead of 2 weeks, we tried to make it like having 1 month. And this is the location where it's at, State of Mexico. And this is actually some of the drawings that the clients gave us. It was a competition where they gave us a binder, maybe 600 pages, and they gave us diagrams of how they wanted the project. They gave us even floor plans, which is crazy. Who asks you to do a competition and gives you floor plans, no? If you see this image here, let me go back. Sorry. This one. I mean, you could see the desks and the doors. They're all drawn out. So we were, at the beginning, we said, okay, let's experiment in different directions. But at the end, we kind of came back. We said, if the client is very clear and he already wants this, why don't we give him exactly what he's asking for? So we give him the diagram that he wanted, but we just work on a different way of placing it on the top of the hillside. So we were talking about this white cube that opens up to be this white cross. And the idea is that not only we have the exhibition space, but we have, let me see if I can, not only we have the exhibition space, which would be this area over here, but we have everything that is in the back of the cross becomes storage space that is open to the public. So we wanted to create a museum that not only the exhibition area was the important part of the project, but actually people coming in, seeing how the art arrives in the trucks, how they come out of the trucks, how they photograph it, how they document everything. And then finally you have the exhibition space. Secondly, we wanted to create a second skin. So you have a staircase on one side, you have a ramp for handicapped access or for strollers for kids, and then you have the yellow, which indicates another way of moving around the building. So we have a second skin for the building, which was made it easy or permitted to have this punctured or perforated skin. So you would actually be moving around in something that you could see the views, you can have naturally ventilated. But then the art was on the inside, protected in a way where you have a double skin or double glass on the structure. We thought of a typical way of doing a brick facade. This is without you could see a very logical structure, a Birendell beams. And actually, you have 19-meter cantilevers on 2 sides of the project, and the other 2 sides are really well placed on the terrain. So even on the proposals that were submitted, our proposal was the one that touched the least amount of land on the footprint. Playing a little bit of what was happening underneath the cross, also with the shading elements, a little views from the upper part. Some of the floor plans, as I was explaining, the things that could happen around the perimeter, and obviously all the space on the inside, which is protected by the glass because of the temperature and the climate conditions for the art itself. Some of the sections, a little bit of the views from the upper part. This is how you would arrive to the project in Atizapan. Also something that Bjarke has been doing for a while, but we did it on this project, which I think is great, is that we actually mimic a little bit of how architects represent topography in physical models. No? So this idea of you have the same terrain, but we casted the shadow, and then we created these platforms so people could actually be under there in this. You have the bookstore, you have the coffee area, and this is like a great place because it's really sunny in this part of Mexico, so this shading element really becomes something interesting. Different ways of actually playing with the artists that we wanted to see how they would fit on this art space, and how it would look on the site. One of the interesting things is that, things that are very common also in Mexico, and I believe that also happens. It's not only from Mexico, but when we did this competition, even though it's a cultural project, the site was donated by the political party called PRI, Partido Revolución, one of the political parties in Mexico. But then when we won the competition, a couple of months later, that were the elections, and the other political party won. So when the other political party won, they said they were not going to give away the piece of land because they didn't want the other ones to have all the medals of this new museum, or the medals or the honors. So the project now at the moment is on standby because we don't have a site, which is crazy, but this is sometimes the things that happen in our country. The project is on hold. It's moving a bit slow, but we hope that maybe next year we'll start doing the construction. Also, when I'm jumping now a little bit back to the first project that I did when I opened up Rojkind Arquitectos in 2002, is understand the needs of the client. I started understanding that architecture was not about how I could perfection my skills of designing project after project until I have my perfect windows or my perfect doors or my perfect proportions of spaces, but it was more about the client and the client's needs and his desires. And when I talk about this, I always say that, for instance, I'm going to talk about a house, but when you get a housing commission, houses don't change that much. You get a program, and the program, maybe you have a bigger kitchen, or you might have a bigger bathroom, or you may have a bigger living room, but that doesn't change too much. But what really changes dramatically is the client, who's sitting in front of you, where does he come from, what does he think, how does he feel about life, how does he want to have his experience with his own kids in this space. So I started understanding that the ingredients to do architecture in my head really started to be really important all around, not only the program, but what was going also around it. In this case, this is the first house that I designed on Rojkind Arquitectos 2002, and it's a house for a ballerina dancer. And it's a house that sits on top of an existing house. And the client was a 19-year-old ballet dancer. And the funny story was that the father, for whom I refurbished all the bottom part of the house, he told me that he wanted to have her daughter feel very independent, so he built her an apartment on top of the house, which was really funny to me, because if you talk about independence, you don't want her to be on top of your house, no? You want to send her to live to some other country or some other place so she can really feel independent. But anyway, what we try to do is maintain the existing house, just clean it up, and then do a new project on top that was interesting enough to and expressed, obviously, to whom it was built. And this is a house, as I was explaining, for a ballet dancer, a very typical floor plan that you have split in two levels. You have the public and the private. And we worked all the details and all the elements in Mexico. And I also remember that when I started studying architecture in Mexico City, I complained a lot about living in a country like Mexico. No, I said, I wish I lived in another country where you can do a 3D project and then send it to the company, and the company can build from the 3D and then send it back to you. But in Mexico, we didn't have those companies. In fact, I think we don't have any company still in Mexico that can do that. But you always try to compare to other countries and talk about the things that you don't have. But in this case, I really wanted to express the pleasure it is to be in Mexico and to understand the magnificent things that we have there. And for instance, the story with this project is that when we were doing the structure of the project, it's steel structure, then you have steel welded plates on top of the existing, on the structure. You have acoustical and thermal isolation elements. But when we were about to get the finishes that I wanted, the contractor was not getting the results that I really expected. So there's a place in Mexico that when you're using your father's car for the first time and you accidentally crash it somewhere, no? There's a place called Colonia Doctores where you have all these guys working in their wrecked cars. And they're incredible. They're like magicians, no? Because you get there with your car, and while they're fixing your car, you can have some tacos in the corner, and they fix it like in half an hour, no? And then your car is perfect, and you bring it back home, and your father didn't even notice that you scratched the car. So I remember these guys, and I went to pick them up, and I brought them to the site, which was really weird because you were not going to bring car workers into the construction company. But I did, and I got the results that I really wanted in the project. And the incredible thing was that the result was even cheaper than getting the original contractor to do the project. This is a project as we finished it with some, these were the original skylights for the bottom part of the house, and we transformed them into furniture so she could have these acrylic elements as furniture, as a terrace garden. sorry, this is another project where we worked for Falcon headquarters. This is some, where we also started understanding that even though for a pharmaceutical company, we also have a specific program, we wanted it to be more about the client. So we worked on this concept. It was a refurbishment of an existing house. And we worked on it until we actually managed to get what we really wanted, and experimenting a little bit with some materials like panelite, that you have this, it's a double glass, a duo vent, but it has a core made of plastic. So you have these plastic straws in the middle, and that's what you get the effect of the orange element. And we wanted to create also an inner garden, but that really expressed what the client was wanting at the beginning, this idea of the pixels of continuous holding of each other. And I also talk a little bit about the bringing contagiousness to contagious strategies. And I remember that that before I started, I mean, whenever I started to design a project, I would grab my pencil or my pen and I would start sketching, no? And even if I was with a client, I would not even hear him speak, no? I would be so fascinated about the idea of designing that you would hear his voice like, blah, blah, blah, and you were just sketching and you wouldn't even pay attention to what he was saying, no? For this case, today we believe that we need to design strategies to be able to design. And when I talk about this is, for instance, this project by Nestle. Nestle invited 5 architects to do a competition, and they really wanted to design something that they can take the kids. I'll stay here and not move. They would take the kids to the chocolate factory so they can witness the production of chocolate. And obviously, Nestle, all they really wanted was to brand Nestle in the head of the little kids, no? But when we got on our cars and we drove a little bit like the traffic you have here, almost the same. It took us like 40 minutes to get to downtown Mexico to Paseo Toyocan, which is where the factory of Nestle is. I really got frustrated and a little bit depressed because I was imagining myself as a little kid getting on your school bus and driving 40 minutes traffic and then seeing a generic factory after a generic factory and everything looked the same, and arriving in a factory that, I mean, I could imagine a kid thinking of Willy Wonka or somebody that a magical chocolate factory, no? So when we got there, it was really, really, really bad and depressing. So we presented what they really wanted, which was this first idea. They just wanted a tunnel for the children to walk around and just see how the chocolate was produced. But we didn't stay there. We presented more than the client actually had asked for. So we told them, you know what? This is the conditions you have. You have an incredible freeway with so many cars going in one direction and going in the other direction. It would be incredible if we get something that you can brand Nestle so people can first relate to where you are, but second, you have to give something in return. And when we did research, we found out that there was no chocolate museum in Mexico City, which ironically, chocolate was invented by the Aztecs. That was our trading currency, you know, cacao. That's how they were exchanging things at some point. Then the Spaniards took the chocolate away. 100 years later, we know it as it is today. But for Mexico City, not to have a chocolate museum was crazy. So the idea was, why not let Nestle get into the heads of the kids if they want to, but then in exchange give something cultural to the city. So the vice president took the idea, he went to Switzerland, he presented the project in the headquarters, and he came back and he said, I have 2 news, one good one and one bad one. The good news is that we're going to do the project, no? And then the bad news is that we only have 2 months and a half to do the project. So at that point I said, I'll get some other friends to help out, we'll hire more people, we'll work 2 months and a half in a row to get all the documents ready. And he told me, no, you're not understanding. It's 2 months and a half to have it built. And so I always say that we passed from this physical model to that physical model to the one-to-one scale model on the site. Most of these drawings we did afterwards, after the project was built. If you see the dotted line is where the complete museum was going to be. Obviously, part of the bad news of the 2 months and a half was that we were not going to get to do the whole project, only the entrance, which actually has a drop-off. You have the main entrance with some restrooms. Then you have an auditorium for all the story of the museum, of the history of chocolate. And then you connect to the inside, which they actually did a tunnel. We decided not to do that. They hired the other architects. We said we want to concentrate on the outside part of the project. But then when you come back to the project, you have a chocolate store. And then you go out and you have some nice landscape around the existing factory. And as I said, Murphy's Law works in every country, no? So everything that could go wrong in 2 months and a half did go wrong. Like here, when you tell us that it's not supposed to rain, in Mexico it was not supposed to rain during those 2 and a half months, and it rained. And everything just went in a very complex manner. But what understanding also the strategies, you have to understand that you cannot have the drawings or your construction documents in the same way that you would design them if you had, 2 years to build a project and you would have time to bid the project. Even for 2 months and a half, we were already designing the building in a way where we can have the foundation and the columns coming out in poured concrete, and at the same time we were doing the steel structure on the floor. So we were doing the primary structure of the element on the ground, building it trying to put it on site, and then getting the secondary structure until finally getting all the layers to cover the complete museum. Some of the images from the outside, thermal and acoustical isolation, the final finish on the outside. Here you would see even the workers were excited that we were about to finish the project in 2 months and a half. And then the day of the opening, and this is another story from Mexico. This guy here that you see in the image is the governor of the state of Mexico, Enrique Peña Nieto, which I think obviously he's going to be our next president. And the reason why we had to do the project in 2 months and a half was he had agreed with Pierluigi, who's the tall guy with the smile that you see on the corner, that if he could give his government speech in this project in 2 months and a half, Nestle would not need a permit to build. So that's why the worry to do it in 2 months and a half is because we would save on getting the permits from the city. And so you had our friend Peña Nieto giving his public speech, and he didn't even thank at the end of the day Pierluigi for letting us use the place. No, this is an image me with my daughter. She was young at that time, but it's one of these projects where you can, as an architect, can take your kids because you've done a chocolate museum. So as neurotic as a father can get, or as an architect can get, I was taking her to all these little details. No, look at these lamps on the floor and all these details of the ceiling. But when we came out and I asked her what she had liked, obviously she had stolen all these jugs from the chocolate store. So she said, the chocolate store. No, she had put chocolates inside all her pockets, and she was happy that there was a store. She didn't care about the project. But the final images of the project. And this image I love because this was really the sensation that I wanted people to feel when they got to the project. It's not Willy Wonka, but it's a place where when you drive in the school truck and you're left there, it's a place that invites imagination. It invites not only children to walk inside a chocolate factory or a chocolate world, but also even question a little bit why as adults we start getting, why we become a little bit more I don't know the right word, but we're not impressed with life anymore. No, when you have kids and you see the way they love life, their eyes just glow. No, so I wanted not only the kids to be fascinated, but also grown-ups to start rethinking why we become a little bit more bored with the typical or with life in general. And you have this opening that creates this folding elements that start to take you in a sequence towards the inside, and on the architectural part, it has all these slight elements. No, even the foldings, they have slight tones of gray. They're not the same white. And I wanted to accentuate this because when we were playing with the foldings, everything looked a bit even, and I wanted to accentuate it a little bit more so we could create a little bit more the sensation of where this element was falling or taking you in the sequence to go to the inside. This is the part from the outside, and this deliberately I left it as a dissection of the project where I wanted to leave the glass so it could read to be continued, no? That this was not the final museum, but this was the first stage. And obviously, in my intention, we wanted to maintain the idea of completing the museum, which obviously never happened, and it stayed until that part. This is the final outcome. We also even got to do the landscape. The landscape is done out of all the recycled material of the construction site. And when we finished working with Nestle, they called us again, and they invited us to do another project, which was interesting. And I like to talk about this, which is a contagious process from digital design to local fabrication. And what I was saying about designing the drawings or designing the construction drawings that you're going to present so people can understand how to do the work. And on the project that I will show you, Nestlé, this is our second project for Nestlé, but this was in Querétaro. This is not the chocolate factory. In this project, Nestlé teamed up with L'Oréal, and the idea is that they will do digestible cosmetics, which is a bit scary, no? Because they tell you now that you're going to eat a cookie as a facial cream, or you're going to eat a chocolate to get a suntan, no? So they're working from the inside out now. And so even my client, he said, well, we did this red thing in Toluca for chocolate. Let's do another red thing in Querétaro. And I told him, no, this we can't do that, no? Because this was for chocolates. Now let's think of something that's specifically for your project. And the second important thing is that when we started working on the project, the municipality came to us and they told us that we needed to contextualize with the city center because Querétaro has a very important city center. It has these incredible arches. It's national. It's heritage for UNESCO, national heritage. So even if we're outside of Querétaro because we're in the industrial zone, they said, well, it needs to have at least arches. But they leave arches in the broad sense of the word, no? So we, at some other point in the office, if they would ask for a project with arches, we would invite or give it to another friend that loves working with these traditional Mexican arches. We would have said no. But I think today we have a kind of perversion of doing things that normally we would not do and try to give them a second view or a second way of doing it. So we did a reinterpretation of the arches in a bubbling effect. So the interesting thing was not to create this element, but how are we going to translate it to the physical construction of the building? After downsizing, the project downsized 8 times because there was a budget cut and then another budget cut and then another budget cut. So about 8 times later, everything on the bottom part of the project was supposed to be pedestrian, and we couldn't leave it pedestrian anymore. So we have some labs at the bottom of the project, and then the upper part we have an auditorium, some offices, the tasting areas, and then some bridges that connect. Having this in a computer, and this is when I talk about digital design to local fabrication. In the computer, you can have anything, no? You can design a digital world. There's no gravity. You don't have to worry about how it's going to get built. But at least in Mexico, again, I was explaining that we don't have these magnificent companies that I love to work with. But so we needed to translate the drawings because I can imagine that also happens here. As an architect, you finish your CDs, your construction documents, and you give it to the contractor. So the contractor is very secure of himself. He's like, yeah, I can do this. But then this contractor gives it to his second on board, no? And the second on board is like, okay. And then he gives it to the other guy. And when you finish the chain of the people working on that contractor, on that firm, the last guy who's really going to build it doesn't have a clue of how he's going to build it, or doesn't understand even the project. So we try to basically bring it down to the basic. I mean, we've done obviously arches in Mexico and cupulas, but not in the way that we wanted. That would be these drawings that would really show these complex geometries intersecting. So what we came up with is that, okay, you have rebars, metal rebars, diameters, and then you have the heights. So we started doing it in a very cheap and inexpensive way, where we would actually get to build all of these cupolas and then start cutting the intersections in the places where we didn't want the cupolas to be, or the rest of the spheres to be anymore. This is the method that we actually were asking the contractor to build it with. What we have is that when you finish the V-bars, you have a metal mesh, and then after the metal mesh, you have splatter concrete, and then you start working on top of the concrete with resin until you have a really polished resin finish at the end of the project. The contractor thought he had a better idea, and he said, no, this is the way the architect wants it, but this is the way that we're going to build it. And he started spraying foam on all the structure, which was awful. It was a chaos, not only chaotic, but really non-sustainable, no? So I took this image, and I sent it to the vice president again of Nestle, and I told him, this is your construction site. It's the most hazardous place you can imagine. Nobody can work because they need to wear masks. So if you don't pay attention to what we're trying to achieve as the architect and trying to coordinate the construction site, this is going to be a disaster. Immediately, he called me for a meeting with the contractor. They made the contractor scrape all the polyurethane off the spheres, and we finally got it the way we wanted. This is the project, how it looks today. This was finished in the beginning of this year. And the idea was with this silver or metallic finish of these labs where you have these two companies, and obviously the contrast with the colors on the bottom of the project, and also the idea that even these boxes are scraped out even from the corners and create a little bit of tension or dynamic with what's happening on the exterior part. By the way, the scientists that are working on the labs, they're really happy with the environments and the natural lighting, the natural light coming in, and we even tried to get into the landscape. Obviously, the client cut the topography, we only got to do these concrete circles, but I hope we get to do the next part, which is the complete landscape of the building. Some colors that we also added to the inside and outside. And it's good to work for a company on a second project in this time. I also like to talk when we're a generation, as you were explaining before, So Fujimoto, Jürgen Meyer, we're already good friends. And not only because we're the same generation, 2 or 3 years give and take, but we communicate a lot. We're constantly emailing, asking what is happening in your country, how are you working, what's the conditions, what is the government strategy. So you try to feed on something that other generations didn't. I think other generations were really about what they could do for themselves and really hidden it away, no? But even though we're friends and we talk a lot, I like to talk when risk is not enough, because we brag about that we collaborate in a lot of projects, and I'll show you, this is an image of, I broke my collarbone trying to snowboard, and I use this because I love to take risks, but when I say when risks are not enough, you end up with a titanium nail on your collarbone, no? But we were invited to do this project in let me show you really quick, in Shanghai, in Ordos, in Mongolia. And the project that we were doing in Mongolia was crazy, because there was, I don't know if you know this story, but 100 architects, 100 men in black invited to Inner Mongolia on a master plan done by Herzog and Demeron. But when we actually got there, they started talking about sustainable issues and about environmental issues. And the first question, if you want something sustainable, why did you fly 100 architects to the middle of nowhere in Mongolia to design 100 houses? You should have hired Mongolian architects or Chinese architects, which are closer, no? And forget about bringing all these international architects. And the result of the project, I'm going to skip the project, and I'm sorry if I go really fast on the images, but I just want to show you like the last images of the project, because the crazy thing was, this is the result. 100 egos on the same master plan, 100 architects, which some of the houses are incredible, but when they're all together and nobody is talking to each other, this is a disaster. This is awful. And when I talk about why we're not learning, is because I wish we would have had more time to think the master plan, to work together as a group of architects, and show that at least we're a new generation that is capable of working together. And another really sad thing was that, I mean, I can't complain. We had a great time, 100 friends in the middle of nowhere. It was fun. Obviously, I'm really grateful that they invited us to do a project there. But when you have this result, I think we do have to question why we're doing things. And even the worst part, which I was not going to tell this story, but I will tell you. You had a big table, and you had all the projects there. And our client, Mr. Kai, he was there with all his friends. And imagine this client who's paying 100 architects. So he was there with his friends saying, pick a house. Which one do you choose? So the friend of the client would say, this is nice. Give me 2 seconds. I'll go for the architect. And he would call the architect up so he can explain the house to the client's friend. So we really felt like prostitutes sitting there and like waiting. They're going to call you up. Now it's your turn. Go and explain your house. So the sensation was really awful, no? But again, this is some of the things that I like to talk about if we're learning something, no? This is some other projects that we did in 2005, where we worked on. This was a project. Imagine 5 offices. We were competing against Maximiliano Fuchsas, Asymptote. I forgot this guy from Canada. Well, anyway, 5 offices, and our Mexican office was the youngest one. And we worked on this project like I think no other project. We really wanted to win the competition. We presented the project, and after 2 years that we submitted, we started emailing each other, asking, I was emailing Hani, asking him if he knew what would happen to the competition. And so nobody knew, the architects that we submitted, we didn't know what really happened. And we started doing some research with friends that we knew around there. And the bottom line is that the client who had hired us to do this competition was not even the owner of the site. He had done a competition to speculate if in Kuwait he could do this project or not. So this is something, again, that we need to learn, or we need to share, no? We need to at least to share the information amongst architects to know what we're actually working for. Well, this was the house. This is the client, Mr. Kai, that I was telling you about in Ordos in Mongolia. Sorry, because the slides were not correct, but this is the architect with his friend, and this is, the client with his friend, and I forgot the name of this architect. Well, she was explaining the house to the client. But then there's also a positive side, no? The contagious pleasures. When I say when you were able to choose with whom you want to work, when you're able to really customize a team, and this is normally what we do in Mexico. Whenever a client comes, we're not a big office. We're an office that has maybe 20 architects, but every time we get a new commission, we invite sociologists, economists, urban planners, landscape designers, graphic designers, and we custom build projects so the client can have the best team possible, and he knows that we're really able to nourish of inviting a really good team for the project. We had our share of trying to do high-rises. Nothing happened. We had this competition where, again, we lost it. This was a competition in Toronto, in Canada, for a high-rise. And this one we're doing looks a little bit black, but this is a project that we're doing in Monterrey. But this one is our first high-rise, our first skyscraper that we're actually getting to build in our own city, in Mexico City, which is really exciting for me to be able to work and do this competition. This project, which was not a competition, I'm sorry. It was a project for a client who had made us work on small projects for like 5 years. these type of clients where you think nothing is going to happen, no? That they call you up and ask you for a small favor, so you sketch something, and then they ask you still for another favor. So after 5 years of knowing these clients, they told us that now they had a site that they can pay us with. This is one of the most beautiful places in Mexico City, Paseo de la Reforma, one of the most important avenues. And recently, it changed zoning. We're in front of La Diana, one of the most known roundabouts. And the zoning was only 20 levels. But when the clients bought the site, they rezoned all this area to 40 levels. So this is going to become it is a very important street, but they wanted to make it more important today. When the client knew that he could go to 40 levels, he started buying everything around the site. So it was 12 lots at that time. Now we're almost about 15 lots that we're all together now. These are some of the views that you have from there. The Angel of Independence, where obviously if Mexico gets to win the game in the World Cup against South Africa, this will be filled with Mexicans jumping up and down. This is what we actually did. We had this 40-level zoning. The clients, it's a mixed-use tower, mainly residential. So the client on the residential units, he wanted to expand the views. So the thing that came up to mind about expanding the views was creating bay windows, no? But bay windows, I actually hate bay windows, no? I don't like them at all, but I understand the pleasure of having this window popped out. So instead of leaving the traditional bay windows, we kind of did a reinterpretation of the bay windows, and we created them in a diagonal way. And the interesting thing was that if you're cutting the building from down all the way up, this point does not move, this point does not move, but the center point can always shift to create a dynamic facade that we were interested in, something that would reflect the function of the inside, but actually would give something to the city. The client approved it, and this is the project that now we're working on. Some other of the conditions. Reforma is these streets where you always have the riots. Every time something is going wrong with our country, here's where you have all the riots, the people complaining. So we want the back part of the road to be the access and only create a drop-off in the entrance. It's chaotic, but it's one of the best places to live, no? You have now all these, we're starting to learn about how to use bicycles in our city. Of course, a lot of people are getting killed while we're learning to be a conscious bicycle country, or pedestrian in that sense. But we created this retail at the bottom. We created all the residential, some structural outriggers, and we have a hotel at the top of the building. One of the most important aspects to me was that this is a pedestrian. I mean, this is a closed street, Manchester. It was shut down because you have some houses at the back. When the client had bought these houses in the back, I convinced him to leave that as an empty space and to create a pedestrian corridor. This pedestrian corridor would eventually bring in the same material as you have in Paseo de la Reforma and create a new urban life around the project. And I was talking about sustainable issues a bit before in an interview. And to me, all these sustainable aspects really make me mad, because I think instead of using them as good things, now it's a business where people charge more if they are certified as really good, sustainable or prepared professionals. If you want to have your building certified, they charge you so they can come down and just leave a mark on your building saying it's a really good, sustainable building. I'm really happy that now it's being legislated. Now it's going to be a law. In some countries now, if your building does not pass a lot of the aspects of the water reusage or solar heating, or if it's not net zero, they're pushing now so you have sustainable projects. No, I think the end is that you have net zero, but we have to do it because of the ethics of it, not because we get a medal or an award for doing so. I think this is we must be really conscious, and to me, one of the most important aspects is really the social aspect. I mean, not if the building produces energy or not, but what is the building giving to the city? And in this case, we do have all these sustainable elements that we reuse the water at least 3 times before giving it to the city. We have some solar panels, but the idea is that we want to give this new street to the city, and we want to really make the rest of the architects that are going to be working in that area conscious about what we should all together tie up. Also on the high rise, we're working to the level where we're presenting the slightest detail. We're dividing the project into these elements, so you get to live in the plants area or the seeds area. There's a whole poetic discourse of why we chose those elements and the life cycle. These are the images of our Mexican workers when they were demolishing some of the sites that they're actually used on the website for the project, because we thought it was. I think we're also really tired of all the websites of developers saying that they have the best building, no? Every time somebody wants to brand a building, they tell you, this is the best location, this will change your life, no? If you move here, you look handsomer, you'll have more money, so come on in and move to our building. And what we said, this is ridiculous, no? So we're actually there's an artist called Guido Torres, Mexican friend, really good photographer, and he's taking the images of what really happens in Mexico. So you have the police guy, really corrupt, asking money to the guy passing by, or that he went over the red light. But this is Mexico, and this is why people would love to live in this urban, chaotic place. Of course, you have the nice apartments, and you have the nice hotel on top of the building, but we really wanted to express what happens on the everyday of the street. In a very fast way, the blue part indicates the residential, you have the yellow part, which is commercial, and then you have the orange part, which is the access to the hotel, with some panoramic elevators in the back of the building. Parking lot underneath, 5 levels of parking, and then as you're going up to the building, the client wanted to take away all the spaces, no? For instance, this unit would grow all the way to here, but we convinced him to leave this green area, not only to have green, obviously, but we wanted, when you come out of the elevators, this view is one of the best views to the Chapultepec Castle, which is one of our best parks, and also to have the hallways naturally lit, but naturally ventilated. So instead of opening up the elevator doors and arriving in a really dark hallway that you have to use artificial light, creating natural ventilation, which also feeds natural ventilation to the units. So we have no air conditioning on the residential units. We have on the hotel, because that's, they have to have AC by contract. And let me show you some of the images. Well, some of the sections of the building, we divided it into 9 modules, as I was explaining. A smaller building gets to, with a different treatment of the facade, because the buildings that you have here and the buildings that you have in the back actually have a lower scale. So we wanted to really be in tune with what's happening to the neighbors. And we wanted to create, in my head, in Mexico, we have tall buildings, but they're like a small building, but with steroids, no? It's like you have a small building, but they kept on putting floors, but there's no sense of really designing a high-rise. So we were really conscious of trying to design something that was designed to be a bigger scale, and by having these modules and having these really urban residential element and designing all we're working with a lot of specialists for the facade. Front is one of them from New York as facade consultants, and a lot of glass companies, even to figure out what was the best design for the facade. We went through wind tunnels also to understand that the facade not only was designed to enhance the views or the experience of the views, but also to have this break the wind loads of in Mexico. Some of the parts where I was telling you about the natural ventilation. And not this one, no, sorry, this one. And some of the images that are now what the project is showing, the idea of the pedestrian street, that you walk in, you have the drop-off for the lobby, for the residences, a little bit of the reflections that you're getting, this building in the back that I was telling you about. And the bottom view, obviously, the other metaphor of the project is that it's one of the few projects that are being built now. There's actually, if you look at the scale of what's around it, this will actually be like a testimonial of what's happening around. So the idea of the different reflections of the faceted facade, that you can actually get to see what's happening on the different parts and not only have the typical reflection of a flat facade or a curved facade. It was kind of interesting to relate to the history of what's going on in Reforma, or even the idea of how the sun reflects maybe on the ocean. No? Some of the views on the other side. And in talking about contagious strategies, I'm going to close with this project. And in the time of the crisis, the financial crisis, about more than a year now, most people got paralyzed. No, most people said, now we have this economical crisis, so I'm going to sit down and be depressed until the crisis is over. No, and this really happened to a lot of my friends and my colleagues from different countries. They said, no, the situation is awful. I don't have work, nobody's calling me. And we decided to create a new company in my office. Besides Rojkind Arquitectos, we created this company called Agent. It's called, it's Agent, and the slogan is Strategic Intelligence Embassy. And I got together with two of my clients of one of my buildings. They wanted to invest in a company, and we told them the idea. They said they liked the idea. And I brought also an industrial designer, really good friend, Alberto Villarreal. And we're focusing on disruptive design, and we're trying to think of this idea of how we become lazy and we don't rethink many things anymore, no? And we wanted to design our first product. It's product design, and these are all of us who make the company, the business model, and we designed our first product, which is a transparent soccer ball. Not because of the World Cup, but we had been thinking of why nobody thinks of a different soccer ball, no? It just changes the way it's stitched, or it just changes the graphic design, or maybe it's synthetic leather, or maybe it's more leather than synthetic leather, but it never really changed. So what we wanted to create was a ball that you can see through. It doesn't have air. It's an airless soccer ball, and the idea is it's made of polymers and elastomers, so it contracts and expands exactly like a football, like a soccer ball, but it does not have air, so it doesn't require to be inflated. And the best thing about it, and here you see a little bit of the video, is that you have this new, like a futuristic ball, but you could start adding technology. So the technology that is, I think this has music. Let me see. Yeah. It has a GPS system on the inside and a radio frequency. So if the ball goes out of bounds, it can light up. So you don't have the referee running after the football. You can see where the ball is at in any part of the field. You can know with how much strength it's hit. You can know the speed of the ball. It has a thermal system at the surface of the polymers. So if it's touched with a hand, you can actually know when it was a hand or not. And it has some cameras at the different points of the sphere, some scanners. That's the technology that will take the most to research. But the idea is that in the future you can actually get the point of view of the soccer ball. So these scanners send the information to the center core of the ball. They send it to the console, and they could actually, at some point in the future, can transmit the soccer game through the soccer ball. So to end the lecture, and as you've seen, I don't want to work in isolation. I don't believe in working in isolation. I believe that the more we talk to each other, the more we communicate, the more we learn, because we're not here to be an architect in Istanbul or to be an architect in Mexico. We're here to be an architect of the world, and we're here to be humans of this planet that we're living in. And the more we learn of each other, the better we're going to be able to perform. I don't care if I break more bones. I will do, and I hope until I die, no? And I just want to leave you with this feeling that if I'm not at risk, I don't feel alive. It's very comfortable to stay inside your house with your door locked and be looking through a window. I'd rather be outside and jumping in midair. Thank you very much.